This is the Major Assignment 3 tutorial part 2. Here we're going to be taking the difference data, creating the frequency distribution, and then making a histogram. First thing I need to do is get the bin, minimum, and maximum. I'm going to use the min and max function. Use Control-Shift down to highlight all the data. And then the bin width, it says here that, well, I can see there's 11 bins there, so I'm going to take the maximum minus the minimum, divide that by 11. That tells me each bin should be 1.7 wide. So each one of these is going to define a bin. So the first bin has a lower limit of 0, and the last bin has an upper limit of 18.9. The upper limit of the first bin is going to be the lower limit plus the bin width. The lower limit of the next bin is going to start at the upper limit of the previous bin. Okay, so I can now I'm going to make this reference here static. And then I can copy this down because the pattern just repeats all the way down. And you can see here at the last bin, there's a gap of 1.7 between these two, which tells you did that correctly. Now, if you read the instructions, it says the title of bin should be the midpoint between the lower and upper limits. The easiest way to do this is just average these two. And you can see that these are the midpoints between the lower and upper limits. Now, the frequency, this part's a little bit tricky. We're going to use a COUNTIF function. You're going to need to look this up to get a good idea of how it works. So the first thing I need to do is give the data range, put a comma. Then the criteria, I'm going to be doing greater than or equal to, and then you need to do an and symbol, and then I'm going to reference the lower limit. Now I'm going to do a second COUNTIF. I'm going to copy this one. Actually, before I do that, the data range needs to be static here, so go ahead and put the dollar signs in. That's not a dollar sign. Dollar signs in there to make that static. Now I'll copy it, paste it over here. And then this one, instead of using D24, I'm going to use E24. That's the upper limit. Okay, so this tells me that there's one value between 0 and 1.7. Since I've set this all up correctly, I can just copy this down like that. And we're just about done. But what will happen if I do right here, I'll remove this in a second. Actually, if I sum up all of these, there should be 50, but you can see it says 49. That's because we've missed the last one, because this last COUNTIF is clipping off the last one. So for the very last cell, just remove that, and then it will count the last one. So you're good with that. You get all 50 of them in there. Next thing to do is create the frequency distribution from this data. Sorry, create the histogram from this frequency distribution. So I'm going to take these two columns here, because this is the output and the bin titles. I'm going to go to Insert, and do not insert a histogram. You would be doing that with the raw data, but we're not doing that. We're just going to do a bar graph and make it look like a histogram. There's probably a couple ways to go about doing this, but this is the best way that I know of. I'm going to go and Insert, self a bar graph, and now I'm going to go to Select Data, and I'm going to actually edit the horizontal values and use the bin titles here. Don't include the heading right there. Okay, click OK. So there you've got the title of the bins underneath these. Now if I double click on one of these, I should be able to reduce this gap width to make it look a little bit more like a histogram. Okay, there you have it. You're going to want to tweak some of the formatting with these decimal places and stuff. So go ahead and read the instructions to make sure you get all that correct. We're also going to want chart titles, axis titles, so we'll throw those on there really quick. Just name those, read the instructions for that. And then finally, it says here, what patterns do you see in the frequency distribution and the histogram, and what does that tell you about the tutoring? So the interpretation of this is basically the same as from the previous page, but what we can see here is well, positive numbers are good because that's telling us that they increased their scores. So we're just looking for some of the high points here. Well, a lot of students had 9.5. Most students had increases somewhere in this range. So just highlight those kind of trends in the data and put some numbers in here and talk about that. That should be about it.